Okay, it's setting itself up, and we'll go live on the other side. Let's do this. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Matters of Faith, the radio show. Matters of Faith, the radio show is a show designed to bring issues of interest to you, the listening audience, that will not only challenge, encourage, motivate, and inspire you to keep the faith, but also information that will engage you, stimulating dialogue that's inspiring, encouraging, motivating, conversations that will help you build your determination, your commitment, and your character. Conversations that will help you keep the faith. Everyone born of God overcomes the world, and this is the faith that has overcome the world, or this is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. Now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, it is time for Matters of Faith, the radio show. All right, no music today, guys. We're just going to do this live in the living color. We got some great guests that we have planned for you tonight. I pray that you'll telephone and tell a friend that Matters of Faith is on again. We're doing something new and unusual tonight. We have been broadcasting live on Facebook, and of course, we're doing that also. But for those of you who are on Facebook, it looks a little different because I'm actually just recording what we're doing. But we're broadcasting live on YouTube, on my Matters of Faith YouTube spot. So go there, look at us live on YouTube, and you will be able to find us there. So please do what you have to do. Telephone, tell a friend, tell everyone that Matters of Faith is on again. And I've got some fabulous guests for you tonight. I got the Brian and Brian Show. Check that out, y'all. The Brian and Brian Show. You see them. They're not going to come in until we're ready for them, but they're sitting there. They're waiting for us. They are really just waiting in the waiting room, but I had them stick around because I like their faces. So they're here with us, and they're going to be joining us shortly. But let me give you a little bit of background on the Matters of Faith show so that if it's your first time looking, you know what to do. And by the way, if you're looking, please start a watch party. Let them know that Matters of Faith is on again. But every Monday night from 8 to 10, Matters of Faith broadcast live. Sometimes we're doing it on Facebook. Now we're trying something new. We're doing it on YouTube. So maybe it can go viral over there. But one way or another, we're going to get this word out to you. And I'm your host, the Reverend Dr. J. Loren Russell. It's my job to engage you in that kind of stimulating dialogue and conversations. Now, unfortunately, you can't call in because we're still kind of weary and leery of those Zoom bombers and things like that. But what we will do is we will take your comments on our Facebook page. If you're on YouTube, we can take those comments there as well. But I prefer if you do it on YouTube, on the Facebook, because I will be able to see that. So just go there and just start your conversations with me there, and I will see those comments and I will respond to them in kind. Okay. Now, Matters of Faith is sponsored by the JLR Company. The JLR Company is a company that you need to choose for all of your church financial planning needs. We specialize in financial analysis, loan packaging, financial analysis, property development. We also do seminars, workshops, trustee and financial training. We do capital campaigns. We also do evangelism training, benefit packaging, and pastoral coaching. And get this, we do life, health, disability, and annuity products and services, all available to you by calling 718 328 8096. 718 328 8096. Because with the JLR Company, it's not about the castle, it's all about the kingdom. Don't forget to get your copy of Matters of Faith, the book. Matters of Faith, the book can be purchased at my Cash app, which is cash.me. Let me put up, make sure you see it. Yep, right. You see it behind me, right? Matters of Faith, the book is there. Matters of Faith, the book. So you get it at Cash Matters of Faith, um, my Cash app, $ Matters of Faith. The book is $20 plus $2.80 shipping and handling. But watch this. You can get the book now. You can get the book now. And I'm going to share my screen with you because I want you to see this. You can get the book now, right now, if you simply go to smashwords.com, share this with you, share the screen with you. You can see it there. That's www.smashwords.com /books /view /993-177. And if you do that, there is a 50% discount on the book. So not 20, but $10. However, that coupon that is there expires tomorrow. So make sure that you get it today. Make sure that you get it today. Okay. Now, also, if you're in a taste for gourmet burgers, lobster rolls, fried shrimp, vegetarian dishes, homemade soups, or an original spicy jerk chicken burger with mango salsa. I know that sounds good, right? Makes your mouth water. You've got to visit the Shepherd Cafe. The Shepherd Cafe is located in Yonkers, New York, in the H Mart supermarket. That's 1789 Central Park Avenue in Yonkers, New York. And it's open every day for takeout right now from 11:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. to satisfy your every dining desire. Further information, visit our website. Visit their website at www.theshepherdcafe.com. The Shepherd Cafe, their key ingredient is integrity. Now, the Neighbors Home Care of the Bronx is waiting for your telephone call. They're looking for certified home health aides and certified personal care workers for employment opportunities. They've gone on hiatus because of the pandemic, but as soon as the pandemic is over, they will be looking to return your call so that you can apply for these positions. There's a priority if you tell them that you got this information from Matters of Faith. $15 an hour, $30 per hour working holidays, $125 birthday bonus, 15 paid days off, and union benefits, including health insurance and a pension plan. And all you need to do is call 718-515-2200, 718-515-2200. Make sure that you tell them, and you tell them really strongly that you heard about it on Matters of Faith, the radio show, and they'll give you the priority treatment. Okay? Now, having said all of that, I hope you had an opportunity to go to the article that is found at www.thebronxchronicle.com, which is also on the screen. You can see it on my shared screen. That's www.thebronxchronicle.com, and look up the article. It's entitled A Network of Mutuality. A Network of Mutuality. And what I want to do is I want to share that with you. I want to read that article for you so that everybody's on the same page, just in case you didn't have an opportunity to read it before. It's available for you to hear now. I'm going to do that a couple of times during the course of the show so that everybody's on the same page. But please go to www.thebronxchronicle.com, pull up the article, print it out, do what you need to do, keep it, because it will be inspiration for you and to you going forward. So here we go. Jeremiah 29, verses 1 and 4 through 7 from the New King James Version. Jeremiah 29, verse 1 and 4 through 7, New King James Version. Now these are the words of the letter that Jeremiah the prophet sent from Jerusalem to the remainder of the elders who were carried away captive, to the priests, the prophets, and all the people whom Nebuchadnezzar had carried away captive from Jerusalem to Babylon. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all who were carried away captive, whom I have caused to be carried away from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and dwell in them. Plant gardens and eat their fruit. Take wives and beget sons and daughters, and take wives for your sons and give your daughters to husbands, so that they may bear sons and daughters, that you may be increased there and not diminished. And seek the peace of the city where I have caused you to be carried away captive, and pray to the Lord for it, for in its peace you will have peace. A network of mutuality. On my broadcast last week, my guest, Reverend Dr. Frank Shope, referenced Jeremiah 29. The scripture shares a letter that Jeremiah sent to the exiles, the priests, the prophets, and all the others who were taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar. This was not going to be a short-lived experience. Verse 10 says it will be 70 years, signifying a lifetime. They were in Babylonian captivity and under the control of a heathen nation. Yet the letter challenged them to make the best of their predicament. It was a challenging message from the Lord. I would be hard-pressed to imagine a more difficult situation than to be in captivity and completely subject to someone else's control. The letter begins with the words, "Thus says the Lord," to indicate that it was God himself who was speaking and not Jeremiah. The Lord tells them it was his choice to allow them to be taken into Babylonian captivity. We read in Jeremiah 25, 1 through 14, how God's anger was ignited against the children of Israel because of their disobedience. He gives instructions on how they are to make the best of a horrible situation. The Lord tells them to build and dwell in houses, plant and eat from their gardens, take wives, bear children, have their children marry and have children. They must multiply where they are. But wait, there's more. He gives them a mandate that defies reason. The Lord instructs them to pursue peace, or whatever is best for the city where they were held captive. He tells them to pray for the peace for the Babylonians. The peace that the letter speaks of is shalom, completeness, wholeness, health, welfare, safety, soundness, tranquility, prosperity, perfectness, fullness, rest, harmony, and the absence of agitation or discord. He was stretching them to new dimensions in their spiritual walk. They need to understand that their blessings were intrinsically tied to the blessings of their enemies. Even today, God always has our best interests at heart. Like the Israelites, our obedience can cause, or our disobedience can cause us to endure tough times and tremendous challenges in order to receive his blessings. We too must make the best of our situation to overcome our fears, our anxieties, our displeasures, our anger, and our differences. Our blessings are also intrinsically tied to the blessings of our enemies. Currently, COVID 19 and the heightened awareness of systemic racism reminds us that transformation is a painful process. We may not understand why we are going through such difficult trials or strenuous situations. We may feel as if everything and everybody is working against us. We may even think God has forsaken us. We might be tempted to throw in the towel and quit. However, change must come, is coming, and is happening even as we speak. The blessings we seek and those God has planned for us are intrinsically tied to the blessings of our enemies, our critics, and those in leadership. Some of the changes that have taken place may go against everything you believe to be the best in the best interest of the community. But this is the situation that we have been given in which to rebuild our community and our nation. Remember, God has not forgotten about us, and he plans to prosper and not harm us. Look at verse 11. He knows where he is taking us and wants us to be ready when we arrive. We must build, we must plant, we must marry, we must be fruitful, our children must multiply, and we must pray for the shalom of our enemies. Understanding that the Lord only wants what is best for us, that blessings and curses are intrinsically tied together. We must use our network of mutuality as the catalyst to truly unite this nation for the good of everyone. All right, that's the end of the first reading for tonight. So I have a question for you. There's a question, as you know, for those of you who are regular engagers of matters of faith. I always pose a challenge question, and this is the question I want you to respond to. I want you to look at. I want you to really engage. Even if you just think about it yourself and meditate on it, I want you to engage this question. In what ways are we each responsible for building a network of mutuality that blesses our nation and our world? Let me say it again. In what ways are we each responsible for building a network of mutuality that blesses our nation and our world? Now, you can text us at mattersoffaith.mos@gmail.com. That's mattersoffaith.mof@gmail.com. So you can text us, and we'll get that text and we'll respond to that text. Okay? So you can do that. That's one thing that you can do. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can write right there on your screen on Facebook. If you're watching on Facebook, you can text me. You can write down, and I will see it. Like, for instance, I'm looking here and I'm seeing my sister says, Amen. My sister said, Good evening. And then Brenda Archer says, blessings to you and yours. So I see them there. All you got to do is let me know. Just let me know that you're watching, and I will respond to your messaging. Okay? Is that fair? Good enough. Now, let me do this. I want to make sure that you know who's on with me, and I want to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. But before they do that, I want to bring them in. I want to tell you a little bit about them, and they're gonna illuminate, and they're gonna tell you more about themselves in their own way. First, I want to introduce both of them are named Brian. So I gotta do Brian 1, Brian 2. It's like like, like thing one, thing two. You like Dr. Seuss or something like that. But I got him. But Brian D. and Brian S. Brian D. Robinson and Brian Spearman. Brian D. Robinson, Reverend Brian D. Robinson, senior pastor at the Fillmore Community Church, an SBC Southern Baptist Convention Church of Buffalo, New York, since 2010, July of 2010 to be exact. Served as the moderator of the Frontier Baptist Association, vice president of the Baptist Convention of New York, member of the Baptist Ministers Conference of Buffalo and vicinity, member of the Coalition of Concerned Clergy of Western New York, co-host, watch this, he co-hosts Buffalo on Fire, Buffalo on Fire, which airs every Saturday morning on the legendary WUFO Mix 1080 AM and Power 96.5 FM every Saturday morning. If you're in the Buffalo area or go online, I know you can get it online because they're simulcasting everything. He's a combat veteran of the United States Air Force from 1980 to 1991. So he served 11 years for this country. So thank you for your service, Brian. We appreciate that. And he's married to Lady Denise Robinson and the proud parents of two sons, Jeffrey and Robert. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I introduce you to, I present to some, introduce to others, my friend, my brother, Reverend Brian D. Robinson. Now, you're a little dark over there. You ain't got no light over there, bro. You need to put some light.
Turn some light on. There's no problem, but I didn't want to leave the camera shot after that great introduction.
No, and then let me introduce Brian, and then I'm gonna let you speak, and then and I'm gonna bring him in, and I'm gonna give you a little opportunity to say something about yourself, and I'm gonna let Brian share in his own way about himself. Senior pastor at Marietta First Baptist Church in Marietta, Georgia.
South Carolina.
South
Carolina.
Marietta, South Carolina. And I think I said on my promo, Georgia, because I'm thinking Georgia. But Marietta, South Carolina. Married to Angela Spearman. By the way, he's using Angela's too. So her name is on the screen. His name ain't up there, but that's his wife's screen. So he didn't steal it. He's not fronting on anybody. That's his wife's equipment. But he's been married for 17 years, and they have 3 boys. Nate, is Nate, right?
Yep,
Nate,
that's right.
15, JP 13, and Alexander, who's 9. He's been working at Marietta First Baptist for 11 years, 9 as a student pastor, and now 2 as the senior pastor. He taught elementary school for 9 years prior to ministry. And I believe his wife is a teacher also. Is that right?
She is. That's correct.
I'm gonna let y'all in on a little secret. See, we got a little history here. Brian is from he hails from the great town of Pickens in South Carolina, and his wife actually taught my grandnephew Nazir, and he loves working in the community, helping to build young men and families. So, my brothers and sisters, I present to some and introduce to others my guest, another Brian 1 and Brian 2, Brian Spearman of Marietta, South Carolina. So I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Robinson. You give me your first goes, and then I'll turn it over to Reverend Spearman, and he can give me his go.
I just want to thank you first and foremost for inviting me on your show as a guest. We've talked from time to time. And
now use your preacher voice. I want to hear you.
We have crossed paths on several occasions. We've talked to each other on air and on phone. So I just want to thank you for this opportunity. I'm meeting Pastor Spearman for the first time, and it's a pleasure and an honor. And I just hope that we can dissect that question that you asked, dissect the article that you wrote. It's a very powerful article. You're talking about a group of people who had been taken into slavery. Mm-hmm. Interesting subject, especially at this time in our nation's history. And I'll give it to God's divine providence that you would have a preacher from the South and a preacher from the North on this show talking about this important subject. So I just want to thank you, and I look forward to the dialogue and the interaction with you, Brother Spearman, and your audience.
Well, thank you, my brother. I appreciate that. Brian?
Absolutely. I'll be honest with you.
I like this.
I'm super excited about being here. I got to talk to Dr. Russell a couple of weeks ago. And actually, I don't know if you remember this or not. I met you in Pickens. a couple of years ago at a Reverend Scipio event
Mm.
that our mutual friend Dr. Al Sutton put on.
Yes, yes.
And so it's been a while, but I do remember meeting you, and I've enjoyed talking to you. And I really have enjoyed talking to Pastor Robinson for the last few minutes before we get on here. To be honest with you, it's exciting to actually be able to sit and dialogue, like actually think about how the Bible answers the questions, because all of the answers are there.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
They're all there.
Yes.
Everything that the Bible references, God has given us an answer in this world that we're living in today. And that article was extremely powerful. And I do look forward to continuing to dialogue about it tonight. And more than anything, I just want to thank you for having me on the show.
Oh man,
I'm super excited about it. I told my wife, I was like, you know what, Ansel, I'm pretty excited about this. So if everybody can get over my wife's name being on the screen there and her good old bookshelf behind me, we'll be ready to go.
Well, if I want to differentiate between the two of you, I can just call you Angela.
Yeah, you can. That's right. That's right. That's right.
So, what's interesting is that when let me tell you how the Lord sort of uses me with matters of faith. None of this is my doing. None of it. The articles that I write, they're inspired by God, and He gives me the inspiration. And I said, Lord, what is it that you want your people to know? And I wait for an answer. Sometimes He gives it to me early. Sometimes He gives it to me late. And it's interesting because whatever I write about, that's what I preach about on Sunday. So my articles become my sermon, or my sermon becomes my article. But they're all inspired by God. And so, since this coronavirus broke out, I've been writing articles that have been very purposely directed towards the condition in which we're living in right now. I had, you remember Fred Luter, former president of the Southern Baptist Convention. He was my guest a few weeks ago, and I had said to him that I knew, directly or indirectly, 45 people who died as a result of the coronavirus. And he said, "Did you say 4 or 5?" I said, "No, I said 45." And I stopped counting because it went up to way over 50. And I've never seen anything like that. And as a result of that, and I attribute a lot of this. I had a psychologist on before him, and we were talking about the psychological effects of what's going on with the pandemic. Then you got this sort of reemergence of systemic racism that popped up again, and we witnessed a tragedy right before our very eyes. And so it just sparked something, and all of that pent up rage, maybe not because of that situation, but being isolated and being tied down and couldn't come out. All of those things sort of came together in a perfect storm. And here we are, sitting here on the 29th day of June, 2020. And we're in a dialogue about something that literally impacts every single one of us without exception. Doesn't matter whether you are from the privileged class or the underprivileged class, whether or not you're rich or poor, whether you're black or white, green or purple, yellow or whatever, none of it matters, because all of the things that we're experiencing are the things that impact us community wide. And as you see, not only has the pandemic been a worldwide event, but also systemic racism has shown itself to be something that is worldwide as well. So the conversation must take place. We've got to make sure that we're sitting down, as you said, Brian, at the table and talking about, and then putting our backs to the wheel and making something happen. And so I'm glad that you guys accepted, because I mean, just by the grace of God, yeah, one is from Buffalo and one is from South Carolina. Can't get much different than that. So the environment is quite different. But I wanted to do that, and I want to continue to expand the conversation and bring more and more people to the table so that we can actually have real dialogue on all fronts, so that we can look at this in all of its dynamics and begin to, to work out what needs to be done in order to make our community the kind of community that all of us can live and thrive in. So, having said that, the question that I asked all of my audience tonight, and by the way, guys, if you haven't read the article, please go to www.thebronxchronicle.com. Read the article. The link is right there on the screen if you want to use that. Other than that, just make sure that you go to www.thebronxchronicle.com, and you might be able to just um, keep the article close to you and read it. But the question that I asked out of that article, which is going to start our conversation, and then we'll just take it wherever it goes. In what ways are we each responsible for building a network of mutuality that blesses our nation and our world? So, brethren, I'll leave it up to you. Brian, you start.
Which Brian?
I didn't say it's up to you. You take it.
Go ahead, Pastor Robinson.
In what ways are we each responsible? As you were saying that the scripture, when Jesus said, whatsoever you do to the least of these, my brethren, you do to me. So whether we want to accept it or not, or whether we believe it or not, we are all connected to one another. We are all connected to one another. And the problem has been that systemic racism, and even with this COVID-19, is that wedge that's in between us. And what I'm thinking is, you can't go forward with your foot on my neck or with your knee on my neck, and I certainly can't go forward if I'm underneath.
Right.
So what we need to do is do what we're doing right now, have the hard conversation, because let's face it, brethren, this is a hard conversation that as a nation, we've been trying to avoid for decades. We went through it in the 60s, some things were done, and then it kind of died down, but it's shameful that it's becoming cyclical.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
It's becoming cyclical, because here we are, 50-something plus years later, and we're dealing with some of the same issues that we dealt with in the late 50s and throughout the decade of the 60s. Mm-hmm. So the first thing we need to do is to admit to ourselves that injustice and inequity has been done. It exists. What are we going to do to fix it? And that's going to take everybody at the table.
Yes.
Everybody at the table. And it's so important. And like I said, I saw God's divine providence when you would have a preacher from the north and a preacher from the south. And we're probably dealing with the same dynamics in our regions, but with different perspectives. You see, different perspectives. So let's pick it apart, man.
Right.
The three of us might not be able to solve it, but at least we can get some folks talking.
That's right.
I think, the biggest thing and the things that I've been thinking about a lot, my dad pastored my whole life, basically retired a couple of years ago. We lived in Texas for a few years, but I was pretty young then and moved to South Carolina and been in South Carolina the majority of my life. And, I have seen so many things that have taken place, but I have never seen anything like what we're dealing with this pandemic in our nation. It is between it and I've had the privilege of being a football chaplain, kind of volunteering at a local Christian school here, a local college, university, who I love working with, and all of this kind of goes together. But the more that I am looking at this situation, it has to start somewhere. And so in our community, I know for a fact that, I'll just give you a perfect example. In Marietta, South Carolina, we have our church has a gym that literally was paid off during this pandemic. And the pastor that was there before me, who got to come back yesterday, they basically decided back in 2004 that they were going to build a family life center that they opened up to the community. Wonderful. And so our family life center is a gym. It's got a basketball court. It's got a walking track around it. It's got all the different machines. And the cool thing about it is it's for the community. Like, it's open every single day from 8:30 to 1:30 in the afternoon. And then tonight it's open from 6 to 8. And the only times it's really closed during the week is on Friday nights and on Wednesday nights, and obviously on Saturday and on Sunday. But it's open for our community. And the amazing thing about it is one of the things that he said, and I think it kind of goes to all of this, is the church has got to be a part of the community.
Yeah.
Oh,
And that's on every side. Whether we have a larger Hispanic population around us, and we have African Americans that play in our gym. We have people from our church that play in the gym, and the community that play in our gym, and so starting somewhere is where I think we have to come and meet at some point. And I'm just excited about talking about ways that we can work together. I'm real excited about the fact that I'm getting to talk to gentlemen who are in an area where it has been affected by COVID, and I'm sure with all the things that we're talking about with racism and all that, I'm just excited to be here tonight. So I feel like we have to start somewhere. The conversation has to start, but it has to be something that we're all willing to come to the table to do, and that's why I'm excited about being here tonight.
Yeah, what's interesting, and I appreciate both of your comments, because you're right. I mean, this is a conversation that it is a difficult conversation. It is one that's been avoided for too long. It is something that we need to talk about. And as you know, my background includes working for the Southern Baptist Convention. Both of you happen to be Southern Baptist, pastoring of two Southern Baptist churches. But I can tell you my role was a little different, because I was the church finance person. I made loans. And I made loans to churches in South Carolina, and I made loans to churches in New York and Alabama and California. And then as a strategy coordinator, overseeing the monies. And I can tell you something which was really interesting about that experience for me, because my territory was initially Ohio, Virginia, West Virginia, Maine, Vermont, all of the Northeast, from Maine all the way down to Virginia. That was my territory. And I can tell you this is interesting, because I was there, that the cultures that exist have more in common than we do differences. More in common than we do differences. Particularly when you look at places like Pickens, the Appalachian region.
mhm.
Appalachia reaches all the way up into New York. And do you know the cultures are very, very similar?
Yeah.
Mountain people. It don't matter whether or not they're in the north or the south, the same thing. But it's interesting, because most people think that the things that they have that are different are the things that make them different. And that's not true, because if you look at them, if you talk to them, their cultures are so much alike. I'll give you another, for instance. When I did my cross-cultural experience when I was in seminary, I did it in West Virginia. And my professor said to me, well, Loren, if you don't connect with the people in West Virginia, don't take it personally, because they're very clannish, they're very cliquish. They stick together, and they don't really let outsiders in. Now, both of them were from West Virginia. And I said, not a problem. I said, all I can do is be who I am. We spent 2 weeks there in Kentucky. I'm talking about, Berea, Kentucky. We were in, some of the poorest places I've ever seen in my life. Some towns we went to in West Virginia, and some of the deepest valleys I've ever been to. I saw homes that did not have roads that went to them. They still had outhouses. Just poor. And it was interesting, because of the 9 of us who were there, I connected with everybody that we talked to when we stayed, because we stayed in people's homes.
Mhm.
And I connected with them. And they one woman, Mary, we stayed at her house, because she said, this is a man's house. No women stay here. Only men can stay here, because we believe in rough things. We believe in 2 things. One, that every man needs to know how to drive a 4x4, and need to know how to shoot. I was like, okay. That's when we first got there. And when we walked into our home, which was up on a mountain, which had about 18 steps going up to get into the door, there was a bull mastiff laying on the steps with his head was this big. She said, oh, just step over him. So we gingerly stepped over him. Now, just bear in mind that I went to Drew Theological Seminary. My supervised ministry, it was me and Pearl. We were the only two black folks there. Everybody else was Anglo. So she said, no, come on, just step over him. So we stepped over him. She said, he used to be really wild and he used to give us a problem, but I creased him. Now, Brian, you may know what that means, right?
Yeah, I got a pretty good
I
idea.
creased him, right? And I was like, so me and the other guy, they were from Michigan, right? This is what, Mary, what do you mean you creased him? She said, oh, I shot him. What do you mean you see? She said, yeah, I shot him right here. Creased him right between the eyes. Didn't kill him, creased him. Because he was chasing the mailman and anybody else came up. So he said, now he's nice. Now he's a good dog. And I'm sitting there thinking, wait a minute. I'm in West Virginia. I don't know where I am in West Virginia. This lady tells me that every man needs to know two things: how to drive a 4x4 and shoot. And she tells me that her son is a good shot, that she's a better shot than him, and her husband is the best of them. Could hit a jar 400 yards away. And I'm saying, man, if they kill me up in here, they'll never find me. Now that's how it started, right? And so we went, and by the way, it's the first time in my life I'd ever slept under a Confederate flag. Because that's what they had on the window. That was protecting the window. That was the curtain on the window. And that's the bed that I slept in underneath the Confederate flag. But Mary was interesting. This is a good story, y'all. I got to tell you, this is a good story. Mary did an online church service. And she says, one of y'all can preach. So my two colleagues who were with me, they said, oh, Loren can do that. Loren can preach. So I'm online long before Matters of Faith, long before this, I'm online preaching to this invisible congregation. Had a wonderful time. Before we left, she had told me that her son had fallen off of a garbage truck that he worked on because he was drinking. He began to drink, and you know, alcoholism is one of the viruses, if you will, of that area down in West Virginia. And he fell off of the garbage truck and hit his head, so he suffers from seizures. And so before we left, before we were ready to leave her house, she says, Loren, can you pray for my son?
Mm.
I prayed for her son. That barrier that I heard about doesn't really exist. It only exists if we allow it to exist. When you see people for who they really are, people are people. People have the same needs. People have the same desires. People want to be loved. And when you do that earnestly, it supersedes, it cuts through, and it diminishes, it minimizes all of the negativity that could possibly go on. That's why the Bible says, love ye one another. You want to defeat evil in the world? Do good to those who treat you badly. Love those who hate you, who despitefully use you. Overcome evil with good. In my opinion, and in my experiences, I have found that my dad was right. You do attract more bees with honey than you do with vinegar.
Yes, sir.
Mm.
Yes,
So
sir.
having said that, guys, I'm gonna open up the floor and let y'all go. Brian, go. Talk about it.
It's interesting, as you were saying that, because you were one on one with this lady and with her family. And what I found interesting is several trips that I've made down to your neck of the woods in New York City. New York City has a reputation of being dog eat dog.
Mm-hmm.
But what I discovered is that was on the larger scale when you're dealing with the masses. But when you deal with people from New York City on a one-on-one basis, they're great people. They're courteous, they're helpful, they're friendly. You know, some will go out of their way to help you, but it's that mob mentality down there that makes people crazy. And I just believe that is the things that we are seeing today. It just takes a mob to get people all active, all stirred up, all aggravated about this, that, and the other thing. And for some reason or another, people just fall in to those 2 or 3 leaders of that mob mentality. You see, but if, as you say, if you can deal with people on a one-to-one basis, you know, respect their humanity, prayerfully they'll respect yours. As you said, you find you probably got more in common than you have different. You see, I think about the scripture uh, in Acts where Peter was with the church. I believe it was at Antioch, and he was eating with the Gentiles. But when the group from Jerusalem showed up, all of a sudden he can't get with the Gentiles no more. He got to go and sit with the group from Jerusalem. And see, Paul checked him on that right away. Mm-hmm. He checked him on that right away. Before they were here, they were good enough for you to eat with. They were good enough for you to worship with, to fellowship with. Why can't you do it now? Why? Because this group is here. You see? And that's what we have to learn. Sometimes we have to learn to be able to stand up against the group. And nobody wants to do that because it's hard. Yeah. It can be lonely. You see, it can be isolated. And in some cases, it can even be dangerous.
That's right.
That's what it's going to take for individuals to go against the grain, to go against the mindset, to go against the group. Especially when it comes to matters of treating people the way we want to be treated.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that when you were sharing your story about West Virginia, we have built a partnership with our church, and we have been going to New Orleans for many years now. And one of the places that we work, when we started about 6 years ago, in fact, it's kind of heartbreaking because of the virus and because of the pandemic. Actually, this coming week, we were supposed to be in New Orleans working with our people. And it's the first time in years we haven't gotten to go. And when you were talking about your story in West Virginia, the first time we went down, I've been down many times, but the first time we worked in a place called Holly Grove. Lil Wayne grew up there, right down the street from where the place that we work. And there are 2 amazing ladies, and there's a lot of guys there that are doing ministry in Holly Grove, New Orleans. But it really kind of took me back to one of the first times that we actually got to go in there and work. So Holly Grove at that point was about 97% African American. And we didn't have, the first time we went down, took some of the North Greenville football players, and we built a relationship. And long story short, I had met a guy who we had gone back after that summer. And the first year we had gotten down there, we'd already worked with the Jesus Project Ministries, which is an amazing thing. There in Holly Grove, it came out of Katrina. There's 2 sweet ladies that had a vision for that, and started with 6 kids on the side of the street. They used to ride through there in this part of Holly Grove, and Miss Deborah is from Wyoming. Okay, and so she used to go on her way to her work at her church, and they just prayed about it. And right after Katrina, they started this children's ministry there, and they had 6 kids that first summer. And now they run about 75, and they're out feeding the kids in the neighborhood. And that's who we'd worked with. Well, I met a guy down there who was actually a church plant pastor, and he's one of my favorite people on the planet. And he was from Hazard, Kentucky. Now he calls himself Hillbilly Hood because my man Josh was pastoring a church called Level Ground. And when we went there with the football team, make a long story short, he took us around. He's like, hey, listen, y'all come to my house. And so he and his wife and his precious kids live in Holly Grove. And when we went there, I mean, we went and did football camps in the public school. The school there had about 800 students. His children were the only Caucasians in the school. I don't know another way to put it. That's just what it was. And we got to work in those schools. And it was amazing to see how this question that we're talking about tonight, how it led into, here's a guy who was from Kentucky, from Hazard, Kentucky. But everybody in the neighborhood in Holly Grove knew him. If he walked in the corner store, if I walked in with Josh to the corner store, they're like, hey, Josh, who's your friend? And we would go in and get po' boys together. And he took us in there. We got to build a relationship. Well, that one week, we went to a Holly Grove Senior Center. And so they have like 40 or 50 amazing senior adults that get together every week. And make a long story short, we went in and we had made dessert for them. And so we came in with the football team. And so 3 or 4 of the guys were African American, and our head coach was with us. And then there was me, and we had another gentleman with us, big old lineman, big old Caucasian lineman. And we went in and they said, hey, just talk to people. And so we were the first group that actually, one of the first groups that had gotten to go in and work and got to sit down and talk to a World War II veteran. And I could tell at first he wasn't wanting to really want to talk. And that's where it started, though. And he says, hey, listen, I don't know who you are, but don't come down here and try to tell me this. I dealt with this in the war, and I dealt with that. By the time we left, I had made a friend. At first, it was, I don't know who this white guy is. Why is he in here? You know, but by the end, and here's what's crazy. I say this story to tell you this. We've worked in Holly Grove for 5 years. And now when our church bus drives through there, they know we're there. The kids know we're coming to Jesus Project. The senior center begs for our kids to come. And so we're kind of brokenhearted. We're not going to get to go back. But it started with a pastor from Hazard, Kentucky, who was at New Orleans Seminary, going in and breaking the ice. And if you ask him, you tell you who they miss Pastor Josh. They miss him because he was part of the community. And so we don't see each other as this and that anymore. When we go down, they say, hey, Marietta First Baptist is coming. And we get to work with those kids, and we get to work in that community. And that is what it's going to take nationwide. Yeah. Is for us to continue to work towards what can we do now and how do we build those relationships. I know that was a lot, but
no, that's good though. That was good. That's good. I like the fact that, you know, that you shared that, because it does take that. It does take somebody breaking the ice. And then, you know, I always look at it in 2 ways. You know, nobody needs nor wants to have a white knight coming in, you know, to rescue them, right? What everybody wants is to be able to sit down and partner with people to make things happen. That goes across the board. And so I like the cross-pollination. You know, when I grew up in the South Bronx, and there was a church around the corner. This is where I started going to Sunday school and spending my time. I never really went to church there. I went to Sunday school. I fell in love with Sunday school there. In fact, I still have the very first Bible that was given to me by my Sunday school teacher when I was 10 years old. I still have it. Now, of all the things I've lost in life, I still have that Bible. And the interesting thing is that my Sunday school teacher is still at that church. Or she left now, but she's not at that church. But she was there. When I went back and preached there many years ago, when I first was licensed to preach, she was still there. And I told the deacon, I said, I have my first, he said, I said, and she signed it. He said, what's her name? And I told her, he says, she's still here. And so she and I have been like this ever since. But what's interesting about this church was pastored by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Herbert Bentley. Benty, not Bentley, Benty, B-E-N-T-Y. Dr. Benty was a white man. He was the only white guy in the community. He lived in the church. He was a tall man, about 6'7", 6'8". He had been there when I was growing up for at least 35 years. He stayed there for about 70 years. Wow. He hung out with Billy Sunday, with
wow.
What's his name? The Crusader. Come on, tip of my tongue. From North Carolina. Billy Graham. These were his personal friends. So their Vacation Bible School, when I was growing up, was the largest vacation Bible school in the state of New York.
Wow.
Little bitty church. When I tell you, we went to a playground called Rye Beach Playland every year, because all the kids in the neighborhood were part of the Vacation Bible School. Going to Rye Beach was the crown on the Cape. When I tell you that we had like 25 buses full of people going to Rye Beach Playground every year, we took over the entire amusement park. and all you saw was kids running around. Grace Gospel Church, great, all these T-shirts. They still have pictures. It's amazing, but it was because he literally, and for all the folks there, never saw him as being white. He was just Dr. Benty, just Dr. Benty. Loved everybody. People loved him, and because of that, we were able to break molds and do things that were undone before in our community. And I say that to back up what you said, Brian. Somebody's got to break ice. I was given the opportunity, and this is interesting. When I was in seminary, when they asked me where did I want to go for my supervised ministry, I said, what are my options? They told me South Africa or South America, Africa. They had a track in Newark, New Jersey, or West Virginia. And I said, well, that's all the same. So they looked at me and said, what do you mean, Loren? That's not the same. I said, yeah, they're all the same. No, Loren, no. They looked at me like I'd grown another head. I said, no, they're all the same. They're all poor. I know what it's like to be poor. I grew up poor. Send me to a rich, affluent community that has no black people in it, that I couldn't get in unless I'm invited. That's a cultural difference for me. That's a cross-cultural experience. So remember that, depending upon your perspective and the school's perspective, because most of the people who came to the semi-Ivy League school were people who were from the privileged class. Mm-hmm. So for them going to Newark, going to West Virginia, going to Africa, going to South America, to all these countries that are poor, that was cross-cultural for them. Wasn't cross-cultural for me. Send me to Beverly Hills, right? Where everybody lives in like $25 million homes, and everybody has servants, and they don't drive their own cars. They have chauffeurs. I've never been in a situation like that before. Send me there. They denied it. They said no. I wrote a letter. I requested it. They denied it. Guess what they do at Drew now? That's a part of the choices. You can go to a place that has Africa.
Wow.
Because if you don't start the conversation, it will never happen. Mm-hmm. Somebody has got to start the conversation, and it can't be one way. It's got to go both ways. Everybody's got to work together. That I've got to come into your world, and you got to come into my world. My guest last week was Frank Show. Frank and I worked together at the North American Mission Board, and we would go to NAM down in Alpharetta once a month. We would stay there for a week, and so the guys would get together. There's only like 6 of us doing what we did nationwide. So we get there, we take a night, and we go to the movie. We always go to see a movie or something, right? So one night, I said, hey guys, why don't y'all come in? I said, Tyler Perry has a new movie out. Let's go see it. So they were like, I don't think I want to do that. I said, why not? I said, well, I go see all the movies. I said, I keep telling you, I know everything about your culture. You know nothing about mine. Come with me to the movie. Frank went with me to the movie. And it was one of Medea movies, right? One of Tyler Perry's Medea movies. When we left, Frank said, Loren, that was the funniest movie I've ever seen in my life. And he got a chance to understand the culture, because if you don't engage the culture, you'll never understand the people. Mm-hmm. So I challenge my Caucasian brothers, my Caucasian sisters, to engage the culture. See what it's like. Don't just stand on the outside looking in. Go on the inside and see what it's really like. And I guarantee you'll find that it's a lot more similar to your own culture than you think. Because I say this, and I mean it from the bottom, we know everything about the Caucasian culture in America because we live in it every day. Everything that we
learn about it in school every day.
Absolutely. We know everything about your culture. But our culture, even the N word that upsets us so much. In our community, we use it differently. You've seen situations where two African Americans will be talking and they'll be calling each other the N word back and forth. And then a white guy comes up and he says it, and both of them look at him and say, yo, what's up with that? What's up with you? And they said, well, but y'all
That's
not
right.
saying it right. No, that's different. You can't say this to us. You can't do that. It's like a husband and wife. If a husband and wife are in a dispute, and I know this is true because my cousin did this. My cousin's married to my best friend, and they got into a heated discussion. Matter of fact, got a little physical, and I was there. So what do you think I did?
Tried to break it up.
Absolutely. And guess what they did?
We both turned
Both
on.
of them. Woo. And I said, okay, I'm out. And I left. And I didn't go back to their house for 3 solid months. And I went there every day. And my best friend and my favorite cousin. I didn't go back to their house for 3 months. Well, that's the way you got to see the culture. If you're going to engage it, you got to get involved. You got to know what it is.
And that's one thing I think confuses our Caucasian brothers and sisters, because we take offense to the point of near violence when one of them uses that term. Mm-hmm. But yet we use it on each other like it's some sort of nickname.
Right.
And I vowed very early in my life, I am not going to allow anybody, I don't care who you are, right, to call me the N-word. Because when I looked that word up, it says someone who is ignorant, who is lacking in intelligence. And I know that doesn't apply to me. So I'm not going to let someone in my own ethnic group or race call me that. And I'm not going to let somebody outside call me that. And when I get around these young people and I hear them banting that word back and forth, I give them a little education about it. You see? And they know what I'm talking about because I work in the school systems. I waited till I was, in my late 50s and 60s to decide I want to go work in the school instead of doing it when I was much younger.
Right.
And I've had to give history lessons to the middle school. Yeah. 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, give history lessons to these young people about that word, because everything, they hear it at home, they hear it on the street, right, they hear it in the music that they listen to, right, they hear it in the movies that they watch, and they think that is absolutely okay and normal. But I see the change in them. I see the anger and the frustration and the animus when someone from another race calls them that. And I'm like, well, why were you accepted from one of your own? Oh, Mr. Robinson, because it don't mean the same thing. Yeah, it does. Yes, it does. It does mean the same thing. Somebody, in other words, they're saying you're lower than them by using that term. Now, you can call me black, you can call me African American, you can call me a high yellow Negro, but do not call me a nigger, or you're going to have a problem. Mm-hmm. And one other thing I wanted to say about coming together and making us all on the same level. COVID-19 has done that.
Yes, it does. Mm-hmm. Surely has.
COVID-19 goes across racial boundaries, economic boundaries, social boundaries. It does not discriminate. And it has put us all on the same level. And I can't say in New York, but what I've seen in New York, I've seen people come together of all races and genders and economic background, socioeconomic background, come together to help one another. They have this tagline that they're using. It's called Buffalo Strong. I'm sure that's being used throughout this country by now.
No, that's just y'all.
But they're using this thing called Buffalo Strong. And I've seen people from the suburbs come into the city to hand out masks, to deliver food and groceries to less fortunate people. People are even transporting people to doctor's appointments and things of that nature. So one thing is for sure, maybe that might be the good that can come out of this something bad. That it is us all on the same level. See, I don't have time to be upset and mad with you, Brother Spearman, because you going through the same stuff I'm going through.
Yes, sir. Especially in the churches. In the churches, we're all on the same page trying to figure out how do we regather? How do we come back together? How do we have Sunday school? How do we have worship? How do we protect our people, and give that perception?
how do you even see your people? I give credit to my wife all the time. When the weather got nice up here, right after we all got quarantined, you know, we started hitting some temperatures in the 50s and 60s and started getting a little sunshine. So my wife said, let's go see our people. If we don't do nothing but pull up in the driveway, blow the horn, they come out, we wave at them, we wave at us, and we tag that drive-by visitation.
Hmm.
So that's how we've managed to stay in touch. Now, not only, you know, through this medium, through joint conference calls, but we'll swing by a house.
Absolutely.
How you doing? You need anything? Can we pray with you? We just wanted to see your face, hear your voice, so you can see our face and hear our voice.
Well, I'll tell you, I can kind of come from, I love what y'all have just shared. And so I kind of came from a different background in one area. The school when my dad pastored, I moved in the middle of fifth grade.
Okay.
And so I moved from one foothills of the mountains area to another one. And I moved to Pickens, Dacusville area. And so when I got there, long story short, I love sports. Well, at the little middle school, junior high we had at that time, there weren't but like 280 students. And when we got there, the band, we could play basketball. We didn't have football. I couldn't play at Pickens yet because I wasn't old enough. We could be in the band, or we could play basketball, or you could do both. And so I was on the basketball team, and I was in the band. And the cool part about the whole situation was one of the things, and I still to this day would consider a couple of the people I'm fixing to mention to be some of the most amazing people I've ever met. So in a school that runs 280, you had an African-American band director. In a school where there might have been 3 African-Americans in the whole school. Now, let me just say, here you are with him, and he's got 100 kids in the band. So in 7th grade and 8th grade and 9th grade, a bunch of children, a bunch of band kids, we worked together. All the parents worked together. It didn't matter, you know, we all worked together. He was one of the most amazing people you'll ever meet. And we got uniforms, and we went to New York, and we played in New York, and we went to Washington, D.C., and we played on the Capitol steps, and we went to Philadelphia. We went to all 3 of those places by the time I was in the 9th grade. And it was an African-American band director in whom his brother had started a catering company in downtown Greenville. Mm-hmm. And he and his wife, Miss Angie, 2 of my favorite people on the planet. Chef started his business in a small little catering company, and all of a sudden we were doing six parties. I started working with him when I was 14. And so me and a couple of my friends worked. We were 3 or 4 Caucasian 14-year-olds working in an all African-American catering company. Now here's where it gets interesting. I did that for 9 years. And helped pay my way through college. Right. And I worked with Chef in places where there might be 1,000 people that we were catering. And we catered Caucasian events, and we catered some for some of the different politicians in the area. And one thing I can tell you is the reason that Chef taught me the way he did, and his brother, who was our band director, I still love his brother to death. His brother has been a music minister at one of the African-American churches in Greenville, in Springfield. And so long story short, basically, Chef taught me so many things. Like he'd say, "Hey, Brian, we're on the clock." He said, "We're done working today." He said, "I just want you to sit. I want you to talk with me." And one night, I'll never forget this. He took this pitcher of red Kool-Aid and something else. And he says, "Look, son," he says, "we're both the same." And we worked together through that. And I can remember one specific time. I always loved working with him. And I loved working with his wife. And he passed away about 2 years ago. And I'll be honest with you, he was like losing one of my favorite people on the planet. But the thing that I learned from him was in 2 situations, one was the racism was towards me, and one was towards him. And so one time we were catering a fairly large event. And I was asked to pour tea and things. And there was this one gentleman who, for some reason, thought that I guess I was the only white kid in there. He thought he would just pick on me a little bit, and I would try to get their tea glass filled and everything. And I'll never forget this as long as I live, because Chef did not say anything to me. All I know is I would go over there and he would want his glass refilled constantly. Chef went over there and he said, "I see what you're doing to my son. Stop it." And from that point on, I already knew that I loved Ken and Ken loved me. But there were walls that were broken down that allowed us to see, you know what? I didn't see Ken as a black chef. I saw Ken as chef. Mm-hmm. And so, through the years, there was one situation where it wasn't good. And he said, "Brian, I want you to be Chef Manigault today." I wasn't real sure at first what he was talking about, but what it was he was dealing with some pretty serious stuff. And all that came together. And I just, I loved working with him. And it was things where I saw there's nowhere else that you could have had an African-American band director go into a basically all Caucasian school and get those kids. I mean, if he took us somewhere, we were on the bus and we were ready to go. And the parents were behind him. And it just was a beautiful thing. And it was in a place that nobody would have expected. So I think, we have got to see there's ways that we can continue to work together. And it's got to be now. It can't be later.
There's your network of mutuality.
Yeah.
Yes.
You've told a story. I've told a story. He's told a story. And we've all participated with the other side, for lack of a better term. You see?
Yes.
And we need to spread that amongst the people that we have, our spheres of influence. Mm-hmm. We need to share that.
Now, it's interesting that you say that, because that was my question. I was going to ask Brian Spearman this question, because I think it's one that it's one of those hard questions, right? What do we need to do to move this conversation into the arena of those who are not as progressive nor have had the types of experience that you have, and have seen for themselves a different perspective? How do we do that? Yeah.
I think that's a question that I have, well, for a long time, tried to figure out how we can move to a different idea, that it is okay to come together. Because Dr. Al that you had on, Al Sutton, me and him have been friends since high school, really junior high. And so he and I, even now today, I'm 43 and he's not much older than me. We still connect by texting each other. I send him a verse or something just about every day, and have for about 5 years. And one of the things that he and I were able to do, and we're trying to just pray about how to do it again, was we were trying to get the kids together. He said, "Brian," he says, like your boy Nate, who's 15, he plays football, he plays basketball. He said, when we would do events in Pickens, and we would invite the kids, and we sometimes would have 30 and 40 kids. And he and I would talk about it. And he said, Nate would just come out there and play. It wasn't like he cared whether it was with all African-American kids or not. He just comes out there and plays. He said, "Brian, that's the way it was when we grew up."
Yeah.
He said, "Why can we not get to that point of working together?" And I said, "Squeak, that's the question. I would love to have an answer. I would love to have the answer. I want so bad for that." And I've got so many friends that we have talked about this question, and we've talked about it. But the next step is how do we implement it?
What's interesting, and I put that question out there because I know how difficult it is to do that. I really do. I was in Pickens one year, and I was a strategy coordinator, for the Northeast. And I went to the association office right there on, what is that, on Liberty Highway, I think that's where it is, or Easy Highway, one of those places, that little building over there. So I went in and introduced myself, and I was talking to the DOM, right? And we having a great conversation. He knows my family. We having a good conversation. I said, "Let me ask you a question." I said, "What do you think about perhaps doing something with Griffin Ebenezer?" He said, What do you mean? I said, well, Griffin Ebenezer is right there. You can look out the window and see it. It's right there. Have you ever done anything together, like feed the community or come together to have a community gathering to do something together? And his whole demeanor changed. Now he's a nice guy, beautiful person, nice personality, but his demeanor changed. And he didn't tell it to me directly. I had to read between the lines. But what he said was, even if I wanted to do it, I couldn't get that done.
Mm.
Now, what was interesting is that I know that Griffin Ebenezer, which is the black church in Griffin Ebenezer Baptist Church, has been there for over 100 years. 100, about, I think they're 139 years old. Been there forever, been the church for the community. There's some other African American churches, but they've been there the longest. And so I know that they've done things together. They've done Martin Luther King days and so on and so forth. But you know who participates with them? The Presbyterian.
Pickens Presbyterian.
Yep.
I know exactly who participates with them because I go to it.
Exactly. But now, and I said, but why can't we, as faith believers, those of us who are quote unquote Baptist, I don't care if you're Southern Baptist, National Baptist, Progressive Baptist, I don't care.
That's right.
But you have this common denominator here.
Mm-hmm.
Why not put it together and pull it together? Because we preach from what is called a pulpit.
Mm-hmm.
One of my dear friends, Reverend Dr. Johnny G. McCann, who was a huge inspiration to me, grew up in my neighborhood, pastored the church, wrote prolifically, wrote 28 books, passed away last year, died on a cruise,
Mm.
said that we preach from the pulpit, and the purpose of the pulpit is to pull the people out of the pit.
Mm. That's
And
good.
until we get to the point that we have a commitment to pulling people out of the pit. Now, some people in the pit are not in the street; they're in church.
Yeah, that's right.
They're standing in the pulpit, singing on the choir. They're trustees. They are stewards. They are people with titles and prestige, but they're still in the pit. I think you said it, Brian Robinson, that you can't keep me down without keeping your foot on my neck. Well, if you're in the pit and you don't want to come out, and I'm standing there watching you, then I've got to be close to the pit or in it myself.
Mm-hmm.
So how much courage will it take for us to make that kind of a difference and say, you know what? I'm going to make that difference. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to speak out. I'm going to stand up, be seen, speak up and be heard. And I'm going to be recognized. Now, and I think the challenge a lot of times, particularly those who are in the positions of privilege, right? Those who have it. What are you willing to give up in order to have that conversation and to move in that direction? Because you've got to be willing to give something up, because nothing, no power concedes anything. You have to take it. And so the challenge is, and this is for you, Brian Spearman. This is for you. How do you challenge those who are stuck in their positions to come to the table and have a real conversation about the change? I'll give you, for instance, I'm in New York. I'm in New York City. You guys know, you're reading about everything that's going on in New York, the changes that are coming. You read about, I'm sure, that the police department are making major changes. They stopped the anti-crime unit, which was plainclothes guys that were responsible for taking guns off of the streets. But as it turns out, most of the major complaints against police brutality are coming from those who are in that elite team. So they disbanded it, literally just disbanded it. Put all the officers back out, and a lot of police officers, particularly in leadership, at the command level. And I do a lot of work with the police department. I know everybody. I'm involved in the police department. One of the guys that I know, commanding officer of one of the precincts, he resigned. He just said, I can't take it anymore. He resigned. So we're not getting the leadership that we need. I'm not in agreement with the direction that we're going, and he walked out. And several others have done the same. And my position is this, and I wrote it in the article. You may not agree with the changes that are being made, They may go against everything that you feel is right for the community, but it's the hand that we have. And if you fold and you quit, then you're not a part of the solution.
Mhm.
You actually are now propagating the problem, because now your experience and your know-how, your ability to work through difficult times, you take that with you. Where are you going with it? Where are you taking it to? I mean, you are here, I believe, and we talked about it when we opened the show, divine providence, right? You're here for a reason.
That's
Well,
right.
you're in that position for a reason. You're going to throw the reason away, the position, because you don't agree with the direction. I mean, didn't didn't some of the prophets that we look up to, didn't they do likewise? Wasn't Nineveh one of those places that somebody didn't want to go to
That's right.
because they said they're just heathen, and
That's
I'm going someplace else. I'm gonna get on the Joppa. I'm going to Joppa. I'm not going over there. And the and what happened to him was nearly tragic. But the Lord's compassion saved Jonah.
Mhm.
His compassion, and gave him an opportunity to do what it is that the Lord wanted him to do. Why? Because he says, aren't these my people?
Mhm.
Don't I still have the choice of what I want to do with them?
Mhm.
Isn't this still my choice? It's not your choice. And even at the end of the book, like, Jonah, you don't get this, do you?
Mhm.
It's not your decision. I get to choose. Yours is to be obedient. And so I look at this thing and I look and say, okay, so what are we willing to give up in order to make a stand, in order to make a difference? This weekend, I'm going to talk about it in my closing, but I'm going to preempt myself because I need to share this with you. This weekend, two young men in the community in which I live were shot. 17-year-old basketball player, just graduated, was phenomenal basketball player, had a great career, just chosen to college. He was on Saturday, he was out, somebody shot, he got hit, bled out through the neck, died. 17 years old. On Friday, young man hanging out with his boys, going over to, you know, sort of rile up the other guys on the other side, got shot in the head. He's in ICU. Don't know quite what the circumstance, what his condition is, but he was shot in the head. And the report, I get reports from the police department. I'm the president of the precinct community council, and I work with the police department trying to stop gun violence among these quote unquote gangbangers. So I get these communications, and they say either not likely or likely. Not likely means they're not likely to die. Likely means they're likely to die. And on that report says likely. And I'm like, you know, here's the mutuality piece. My niece knows both of them.
Mhm.
My niece went to junior high school with the 17-year-old and hung out regularly with the 20-year-old. They're in the same little crew together. I don't know these kids, but the mutuality, it affects me,
Mhm.
right? When I talk to my niece and she's holding back tears and doesn't quite know how to voice that, what do you say to her? So whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly,
Mhm.
because this young man could have been a basketball phenom. We don't know,
Mhm.
but his life is no longer. His family, community, the outpouring of love for him. So we're mutually tied together. If we don't figure out, Dr. King said it best. He says, if we don't learn how to live together as brothers and sisters, we're all going to perish together as fools.
And that's the first part, my brother. We got to start to learn. You know, it's funny you should mention that because just over this past weekend, we had 7 shootings. Buffalo has a population of roughly somewhere between uh, 257 and 261,000 people. That's how big Buffalo is.
Wow.
And already
we
we
got
have
almost that in my little
right,
council district. We have 76,000 registered voters in my little council district.
right. And we make up, the African American community makes up about 48% of the population within the city limits of Buffalo. And all of those shootings that took place were people who knew each other in the neighborhood, people who look like us.
Mm-hmm.
And what confuses a lot of people in the suburbs and in more affluent neighborhoods, you run around here talking about Black Lives Matter. Why don't they matter to you?
Right.
I had to stop and think about that thing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I had to stop and think about that. And they're right. How are we going to get people who look like Brother Spearman to honor and respect the humanity in us if we don't do it with each other?
That's right. That's right.
That's the mutuality right there. We have got to stop killing one another and recognize and honor the humanity in the people that live in our neighborhoods, that go to our schools, that shop in our stores, that live next door to us. It's got to start there.
Yes.
And when we start loving one another, then those outside will begin prayerfully to love us too. When they see the love that we have for each other, and you know what the Bible say, love thy neighbor as yourself. I preached a sermon, before I can love my neighbor, I gotta love me.
Right. Right. Yeah, because the truth of the matter is, some people, I don't want them to love me the way they love themselves, because they don't love themselves.
They don't love themselves.
They got to learn. They've got to learn. They got to learn how to love themselves so that we can become a beautiful mosaic. We have to do better among ourselves. And interesting, right? Because if you're sitting on the outside, and Brian Spearman, you can relate to this. I mean, you can comment on this. I want you to. If we're looking at what happens within the African American community as an outsider, you know, it's probably easy to shake your head and say, "Oh my God, that's such a terrible thing. Oh my God, that's such a horrible thing." Not recognizing that every one of those deaths, every one of those negative situations impact you, because literally that could be the one person who has the cure for something that you have as an ailment. Um, what's the guy's name? The young man, made a movie about him, who was a doctor who did the first heart transplant with blue babies in
Talk
Pennsylvania.
about Ben Carson.
No, not Ben Carson. He was a brain surgeon.
Yeah.
He was a student. He couldn't go to college because he had no money. But he
Oh,
was
okay.
brilliant. He knew the answers. His name is, it has a girl sounding name. Oh my God, it'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, this guy literally gave direction to the one who took credit for solving the blood problem with blue babies being born. They have enough oxygen in their system and they became blue. And he perfected a surgical procedure that literally saved the lives of countless children who were born with this blood flow issue. Eventually, they gave him an honorary doctorate, and his picture hangs on the wall of Johns Hopkins University, as being, and they now credit him with being the one who solved those problems. But while he was doing it, he got no credit at all. And so, if that life was snuffed out prematurely, think about all the kids, all of those children that would have likewise lost their lives because he wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so somebody's going to tell me what the name is, because I'm looking at you guys. Come on now, this is my immediate shout out. Come on, guys, y'all know what I'm talking about. Y'all have to come up with it. I know you know it. So somebody tell me. I
It's
got a spot.
interesting you should say that because as you were telling that story, I was thinking about Dr. Charles R. Drew.
Yeah, yeah.
Dr. Drew, when he discovered and learned how to separate uh, blood plasma
Mm-hmm.
during the Second World War, he saved the lives of tens of thousands
Mm-hmm.
of soldiers. Tens of thousands. And he didn't care what color they were. You see.
I think Pastor Robinson, something you said that really, I really, it made me think as you were talking about how, you know, we have to love ourselves first,
Mm-hmm.
and and how the community has to quit killing each other.
Yes, sir.
And one of the things that I think that you know, I, I really struggle with, the gospel is at the heart of all of this.
Mm.
So I want to look at people regardless of their education, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their background, socioeconomic background, in the sense of there's two types of people in this world. There are those that know Christ, and there are those that don't.
Mm-hmm.
And the destiny for somebody who doesn't know Christ is not a good one. And so, when you were talking, Dr. Russell, earlier about how, looking from the outside in, I really struggle a good bit with several things. Number one, you go to a third world country. When we go to Nicaragua, for example, I've been 7 times, I guess. You know, and you see people who we are working with, those that are some in the poor neighborhoods. They might get water 2 hours a day. I mean, to the point of a lot of the people don't have shoes. Some of them are working in the trash dumps. I say that to say this. The crazy thing about all this is there's only two types of those folks. There are those that know Christ, and there are those that do not. And so for me, it's a gospel issue. Like, we have to be willing to see ways in which we can share the gospel with people of all races, of all nationalities. And so I have loved hearing y'all dialogue about this because, I love going to New York. I mean, I've been to New York many times to visit. I enjoy the city. I like it. Now, I live in Powdersville, which is a little small community outside of Greenville, South Carolina. But I love going to the city. I love seeing people. Like, I enjoy being around people of all dynamics. But I think the conversation is you have to love yourself first to love each other, and breaking down those walls, just all the way back from the West Virginia story earlier, is starting. And I think we're on the right track. We just got to keep pushing towards that.
Now,
So
let me
Well,
take
let
over
me
the
just
host
before
for
you.
a minute.
I want let me jump in for just a second. There was Vivian Thomas was his name. Vivian Thomas. That's the guy.
Okay.
All right.
I tell you, I had a really smart audience. I knew they would get it to me. So
All
thank
right.
you so much. But yes, and that was interesting because what you're saying, both of you are absolutely 100% correct. As I heard you talking about the diversity, as I heard you talk about the ways in which we need to go about doing this, I thought about my involvement in the Rotary Club. Are y'all familiar with the Rotary Club?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
I've been a three-time past president of Rotary, and I now sit on I am the chairperson of the, what is it called, the diversity. Hold on for a second. Let me get my tag. Hold on. It's really interesting because
Uh-oh, he going to his briefcase now.
gotta go where it is. It's the diversity subcommittee, diversity and equity subcommittee of the region. So this is the thing right here.
Uh-huh.
So the former, he just went out as the governor of the region, and he was my vice president when I was the president, for my third time. And so he became the governor. And so he asked me to do that. And so we made a statement. We put together a statement that we put out on behalf of the Rotary. and sent it to all of the clubs within the region. And our club stretches all the way over to the Bahamas,
Wow.
excuse me,
Wow.
Bermuda. And so we put out a statement on diversity. And one of the things I said in that statement is that, you know, I challenge all of my Caucasian brothers to literally allow, you know, themselves to be vulnerable so that we would be able to create the kind of equity that we need in our nation, so that all men, women, and children will be able to live in a country and in a world, because Rotary is worldwide,
Yeah.
where we can have equal opportunities, that we can make the world really, you know, like we say in our Constitution, where all men are created equal and endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, which, you know, is the right to freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so I made that real clear to them. And then the incoming governor asked me would I consider staying on as the chair of that committee. And of course, I'm honored to do that. But it's interesting because my club in Yonkers is one of the most diversified clubs I've ever seen in my life.
Mm-hmm.
We have Indians, Pakistanis, we have African Americans, we have Africans, we have Haitians, we have Anglos, we have Italians, we have Latinos. It is a literally a melting pot of cultures, and we come together to do one thing, and that is to make life better for others.
And you know what? Especially being Christians, I like what my brother shared about it being a gospel thing.
Yes.
Skin is not the problem.
Nope.
That's right.
Sin
Yeah.
is the problem.
That's
Exactly.
right.
That's right.
Racism, bigotry,
Mm.
intolerance, prejudice, discrimination, according to the word of God, is sin.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
And anyone who indulges in and practices that is sinning,
Yep.
and they need to repent from that.
Right.
That's right.
They need to repent. And that's what we need as spiritual leaders. That's what we need to be preaching and teaching from our pulpits.
Right.
If
And
you
not just the pulpit. See, that's the
everywhere we go,
right, because that's
That's right.
the sermons that preach the loudest are
our
the ones
praise
that
God.
come with their pants and shoes on. They're ones walking.
That's
Yes,
right.
We've got to make sure that we're not just pontificating the word, but we're living it every day. And I think
absolutely.
that, you know, when I talked about, you know, that they asked me to chair that, it's not because of my outlook on diversity. It's my outlook on Christ,
That's right.
because that's what they're looking at. That's what they see. So when they see me, they need to see the embodiment of Christ. Christ
That's
was
right.
inclusive. He wasn't exclusive. He was inclusive. And then, yes, he's exclusively ours, but he is inclusive for everyone. Anyone who wants, anybody who desires, can have that salvation.
Yes, sir. And
Absolutely.
and we better get used to it, because like I preached Sunday, I closed my sermon out with this. You better get used to loving your brother here on earth, because when you get to heaven, my Bible tells me that it is going to be filled with people from every tongue, every nation, and every tribe.
That's right. That's right.
So you better
Absolutely.
learn, we better learn how to get along here.
That's right.
Mhm.
Oh, by the way, if we don't learn how to get along here, we ain't going. We're gonna
That's
miss,
true.
we're gonna miss it.
That's
You know, so
That's
you don't have to tell them that, because if they miss it here, they ain't getting there.
You said they're not getting in.
They ain't getting in.
Yes,
And see, and that's the hard truth, right? That's the
Yeah.
hard truth is that if you don't get it right here, you ain't gonna never make it in. Now that's a tough thing to swallow. Hold on for a second, guys. I got the fireworks going off up here now. They're important fireworks up here now, so they going
don't
for.
worry, they've been going off my neighborhood since we started.
Oh yeah.
Oh, they'll still be going off about 4 days after the 4th here.
Yeah.
They shoot them at
They've been
all.
going off
No matter what day it is.
for a month before the 4th even got here.
So
That's right.
so let me use that too. Let me use that because I want to, and I haven't even read the article for a second time, but that's okay because this is a really important conversation. But watch this. There is something going on also with these fireworks, because we have seen in New York, and I've talked to the upper echelon of the police department. We have seen in New York more fireworks. I'm talking about 1,000 times more this year
Wow.
than ever before. 1,000.
Wow.
So thought is that somebody is purchasing them and selling them on the market.
Uh-huh.
Why? to keep the confusion going,
Yeah.
to keep this stuff moving along. Those riots that you heard about in New York,
Mhm.
this I know for a fact. Those riots that you heard about when they were looting and stuff like that, they weren't started by people who live in the community. In
Outside.
fact, they had literally, listen, this is true. This is true. Literally, people were dropping off bricks and rocks in certain strategic places
Yeah, I
throughout
heard
the
that.
community.
I heard that.
Wow.
And they had people that were being paid to come in and stir up stuff. You mentioned the mob mentality, Brother Robinson. You mentioned that, Pastor, and that's true, because what they do is they come in, they pick up and they'll start throwing the rocks. They depend on the mob mentality to let everybody else join in.
Mm-hmm.
Not just that. Watch this. This is another thing. They also brought in bottles, gasoline, and rags to make Molotov cocktails. There was a police car in Brooklyn. This is fact. This is fact. I can read an email. I can read a text to you from a commanding officer that I know, and I sent it because they arrested about 200 people one night. 200.
Mm-hmm.
I sent him a text and said, "Give it to me straight, no chaser. What happened?" And he began to elucidate and explain to me and expound on what he said. They came into this community. They were not from here. They planted rocks. We caught a car that had bottles in it, gasoline, and rags to make Molotov cocktails, and they were giving them to people to throw.
Mm-hmm.
There was an incident that took place in Brooklyn. Two sisters, biological sisters, threw Molotov cocktails into a police cruiser that had officers in it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
They were from the Catskills. They were Caucasians.
Mm-hmm.
They were not black. They were Caucasians, and they were stirring up stuff. And then the people just got started. They had the same thing happen here in the Bronx. The same thing. So they had somebody's, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there's something going on that's trying to keep things stirred up so that we can't have these dialogues.
That's
Because
right.
what interferes with the dialogue is the incidents that occur, that people now taking their attention from what's important to this stuff over here that someone has set up in order to steer us away from what's really, really important. And what we must do is we must not be distracted, because we must recognize that it is a plan.
Well, without a
Because
doubt,
it
I've
happened.
heard stories and seen you know, on some of these TV magazines where there are elements out there that are literally working toward another civil war and a race riot.
Yes, yes.
You know, and my question is, and who will benefit from that?
No one. No one will
Absolutely.
benefit. No one's going to benefit from that.
No one is going to benefit from that. All you're going to have is death and carnage and destruction everywhere. And I'm a little bit of a history buff. And what I've learned from reading world history is that anytime an empire falls, it starts from being weakened from within.
The inside.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Then it becomes easier for outside forces to come
Right.
and take it over.
Right.
I'd love to say this real quick. And so one of the things, when you were talking just a few minutes ago, I preached through the book of Jonah not long ago. And I'm preaching through the book of Esther right now. And just looking at God's calling somebody to do something. So, the one thing that I have tried to point, not just our congregation, but our church, our community. We had tornadoes hit here right after the pandemic started.
Mm-hmm.
We had people right next door to us that lost everything they have. And I saw the community come together, businesses, people who would have never probably known or been having the time to do that. And the one thing that I have been trying to just get folks to see is the word hope.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hope.
Yeah.
Like there is still hope. If me as a believer in Jesus Christ, I know where my hope lies. I do not have to worry about if I were to die today at 43 years old, am I ready to leave this earth? No. I want to see my kids have kids. I want to see the world prosper. But the word hope, and you know, and you look through, and I was reading a book the other day. I picked it up from my dad on Father's Day. There's no way I could tell you all about how my dad, I mean, my dad is kind of my spiritual mentor, obviously being a pastor. You know, when you were talking earlier, Dr. Russell, about how to do it, even back in the 90s, we partnered with an African-American church plant right down the road in Daconsville. And Jesus is Lord Ministries is still going. And my dad and some men from our church actually helped build that. But there's hope. Like there is hope in everything that we see. And regardless of how bad it gets, this book that I bought him was talking about some of the different things like you're talking about, like Jonah. I mean, he had rest in in the fish, right? David was being chased, and I love the book of Psalms, and we don't have time to unpack all of that, but every emotion is in the Psalms. I absolutely love that. But even when he cries out, when David cries out, there was still hope. I mean, he says, look, where do I look for rest? In Psalm 121, Psalm 121, where do I look? I look to the mountains. You don't look to the mountains for the rest. He looks to God that created those mountains and that hope. And it's crazy how that book was just talking about so many different ways and just gave examples of people who were waiting, but they saw hope. I mean, you were talking about Jeremiah in your article. I mean, that guy waited forever to have somebody, you know, come to understand what he was talking about. And I feel like the more we work together, the more the hope is seen. They see Christ in us. They see a difference in wanting the hope that people need, because that's what we have. We have hope in Christ. And I have absolutely loved hearing, you know, us talk together tonight, just to kind of say, hey, listen, you know what? Regardless of what we face, we got hope that's far beyond this earth. Yep. It's a hope that regardless of how bad it is, I mean, when those people lost everything they had, I'm not going to say, hey, listen, you know what? I'm sorry. I know that you lost everything, but if you'll wait just a minute, I can't hug you today because I'm scared I might catch something. No, they were people. They lost everything they had, and they're looking around, and we were able to share hope. I was able to open up the Psalms and say, hey, look right here where you can find hope. I have thoroughly enjoyed tonight. And hey, I don't know. That's just where I've been sitting here, just kind of pondering in my mind all of this and trying to put it together.
Yeah. You know, and this conversation won't end. I can assure you that. I had gotten a telephone call earlier today. Actually, I got a text from one of the borough chiefs of the police, and he was contacted by someone at the news media, and they wanted to get a statement from him because they wanted to talk about the killings that I shared with you. And he asked me if I would. He said no. He said you really need to get another perspective, and he recommended me to the press. And I said no, I have no problems with it. So he gave my name to the gentleman who's writing. It's supposed to do the piece on the article, whatever it was, the article or the video, whatever it's going to be. So we had a chance to chat. He called me back and said he was called out, so that they had to scrap that piece because there was a cluster in Chappaqua. Now watch this. This is really interesting. There was a cluster of a breakout of the coronavirus in Chappaqua. You know Chappaqua. Everybody knows what Chappaqua is, right?
Right.
That's where Bill Clinton lives, Chappaqua. But apparently there was an outbreak of the coronavirus there, and they said, no, go cover that. The lives of these folks not as important as the pandemic, the cluster of folks that broke out up there. Now he didn't say all of that. I had to read between the lines, but he did tell me there was a cluster of coronavirus outbreak in Chappaqua. Now, I say that to say he may even be on right now. So I'm not saying anything that I wouldn't say to him face to face, but it's interesting. The priorities. The priority. What's the priority? Someone who's sick is not dead. Now, there's two sides. There's two ways to look at that, right? The person who's dead can't be brought back. The person who's alive can be saved. But at the same time, the person who died leaves a trail of sorrow and grief.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those need to be ministered to.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of them, without exception. And there's a long list because this was a young man, 17 years old, that was life was taken from him, and um, he was poised to take off, to go to college and everything else. His life was beautiful. It had promise, but there was an outbreak in Chappaqua.
Mm.
Priorities, right? What are we looking at? So now we have to begin, and I always say this: we have to hold people's feet to the fire.
Mm.
And I don't care what role you play. You can be a janitor. You got to hold people's feet to the fire, right? If I'm a janitor, then I got to make sure that the place that I clean is clean, that it's
That's right.
sanitized, so that people don't come in and catch a virus or anything else. I got to do my part there.
That's
And
right.
and people who work in those positions meet and greet a lot of people. Well, converse with them at whatever level you're on. Have the conversation, because the conversation will bring about, as you talked about, uh, Pastor Spearman. The more work we do, the more hope we gain.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to do it at whatever level. I don't care what your role is. I don't care what your title is. None of that matters. What matters is we've got to do the hard work. I like that commercial now. I think it's was it a Geico commercial, and the guy has a toothbrush or something, and he said, "What do you want, DJ Khaled to come in and be your motivational speaker?"
Oh yeah,
And he
yeah,
said,
yeah.
he said, you know,
Tight circles.
yeah, right, little circles. Do it again. Do it again. Put the work in. But that's what it's about. Put the work in. Without the work, the results can't be there.
That's
I
right.
don't care if it's brushing your teeth. You got to put the work in.
That's right.
This requires work. And if you don't want to put the work in, then you know the old saying, lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Get out the way.
Mm-hmm.
But we got to put the work. And if you quit, my mentor, one of my mentors, Johnny McCann, I mentioned him earlier. He used to always say, you will succeed if you don't quit.
Mm-hmm.
But if you quit,
You'll never succeed.
you can't. You ain't even in the game no more.
That's right.
And there was a gentleman, you guys might even know him, name Gary. What's Gary's last name? I'm thinking about my partner at my co-minister here, Gary Frost. Y'all remember Gary Frost? Brian, you remember him? Brian.
Oh yeah.
Gary Frost was first African American vice president of the North American Mission Board, and
Mm-hmm.
came to New York to be the DON in New York City. And I met him. We had a chat. And I asked him when I first met him. We had a dinner. He came to the church to preach, Brady Universal Baptist Church, and we went to dinner afterwards. And I am who I am. So I said, Gary, I have to ask you a question. He said, what's that? So how do you justify being an African American and a Southern Baptist at the same time?
Mm.
And he said, and my pastor looked at me like, oh man, why you ask that question? Because it's an honest question, right? I got to know. And he said, so he didn't know it, but he touched a nerve, and I didn't know it, but it lit a fuse
Mm.
that eventually led me to being on staff at the North American Mission Board.
Mm-hmm.
He said, Loren, that's a real good question. He said, it's an honest question. I'm going to answer it for you. He says, I grew up in Ohio. He said, I was a sportsman. I love sports. I love football. Played football all my life. He said, one thing I discovered in football is that you can't change the game sitting on the bench. You got to be in it. He
Mm.
said, I don't agree with everything that the Southern Baptists have as their doctrine. I don't agree with everything that they do. But in order to make real change, you have to be in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, now see, that's an answer that I can live with, because I know that's true. Because you can't just talk the talk, you got to walk the walk.
That's
So in
right.
order
right.
to make change, you got to get in the game.
Mhm.
So if you pull yourself out of the game, you no longer can be a part of the change. When you pull yourself out, you put your team at a disadvantage, especially if you're a key player.
Mhm.
And I think that we are key players. I think Brian Spearman, I think that Brian Robinson are key players on this field with COVID-19, systemic racism. And watch this. You mentioned, Brian, you talked about Pastor Robinson. You said that COVID has leveled the playing field, sort of, because 23% of people who are infected with and die from COVID are African American. And that's because of systemic racism. Remember, it's systemic. It's in it's like lymphoma. It's in all of the lymph nodes of the society in which we live. So I was talking with another brother friend of mine, and he said, why is it that the rate of infection and death is higher in communities of color than it is in Caucasian communities?
Because of health
Because of
disparities.
the disparities in the healthcare system, the lack of resources they put in there, the lack of information. People don't know why. Watch this. It also is evident in the educational system where you don't know. You've been miseducated. You don't have the information, and it trickles down. It goes from one generation to another generation to another generation. So you don't go to have regular treatments. You don't go to have regular checkups. That's why colon cancer is so high in African American men, because they don't go get examinations. Why is that? It's all because of the systemic nature of what we have termed systemic racism. We've got to root it out at its core, which means that the hard part of our work is that we've got to take chemotherapy.
Mm.
We gotta kill off some stuff in order to be well. Hey, tell your wife.
That's my boys.
But that's your boy, that's
They
hey.
just got in from youth camp.
Okay, good. Tell them I said hey. But yeah, but you follow what I'm saying is that we have to go through the hard work of rehabilitation. We know we're diseased, so now we got to be treated. It's not going to be easy. Treatment is hard. Nobody likes chemotherapy. Nobody likes radiation. But we've got a cancer that's eating away at the very core of our being.
Yes, sir.
And it's got to be eliminated. And the hard work is these discussions. The hard work is bringing people to the table that do not agree at all. But you got to agree to disagree and then go forward.
Yeah.
I think we can do it. I think we can do it.
I agree.
That definitely concerns me is those of us who name the name of Christ, who call ourselves Christians and followers of Jesus Christ. We have to do some of them like Paul did Peter. We just got to confront them for who they are.
Exactly.
And make them understand you cannot be a follower of Jesus Christ if you hate your brother.
That's right.
That's right.
You can't. Yeah, you absolutely can't. And once we're truthful to them, and then like you have been saying, walk the walk and talk the talk. You know, let people see the gospel in you.
Yes.
Let them see it in you and what you're doing with your life. And we, like you said, it's a cancer that has to be cut out. And then we've got to go through the treatment. It might be ugly, but if we look in the long term, we will all be better off for it.
Yep.
All be better off.
Yep.
Now, I think one of the things that you said just a minute ago is if you quit, nothing changes.
That's right.
We've got to work through the tougher issues, you know, and if we're not going to be a part of the solution, then we just need to step out of it.
Exactly.
I mean, that's really truthfully the truth is the fact is, you know what, if you're not doing something, start somewhere.
Yep.
You know, and that was one
you
of the
don't have
things.
to reinvent the wheel.
No, that's exactly right.
There's a ministry out there that is dealing with this. Link up.
That's right. That's right. One of the things that I'll say, my dad, he pastored in Beaufort, South Carolina for about 12 years.
Mm.
And in those 12 years, their church partnered with a church named Brick Baptist. So St. Helena Baptist, which was mostly Caucasian, teamed with Brick Baptist, and they would switch pulpits and they would switch music.
Oh,
So
wow.
they would go to Brick. Now, listen to this, for 12 years now, the
Wow.
whole time my dad pastored there, they would go to Brick and Dad would preach, all right, at Brick, and they were over the music.
Wow.
Well, when they came to St. Helena was over the music, and Brick's pastor
Would preach.
was the preacher, and they switched pulpits.
That's interesting.
And you know, people said, "Well, that's," but it can happen. I mean, we actually have our pianist at our church is amazing. He's been there 30 years, and he taught in a school down the road, and he leaves our church. We have a 9 o'clock service, and then he goes and plays for a predominantly African American congregation in the second service.
Wow.
So our youth group has been going to their church a couple of times a year, and we go to our service, and we get on the bus and we travel on over to Community Mission, which is over in Greenville, and have a blast. Have a blast. And so I think anything that we can do to help each other, starting with the pulpit, starting with the church, so that people on the outside of the church can see, you know what, they're really serious about what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that's just an amazing way to continue to work towards what we're talking about tonight.
Yes.
And the great thing
Well, gentlemen,
is that your young people, that next generation, they're being exposed to people
Yes.
of different cultures, of different
Mhm.
backgrounds, of different races, and
Mhm.
to them, then they are learning because you're teaching them and showing them that there is no difference.
That's right.
You know,
Absolutely.
we're all God's children. We're all made in His image.
That's exactly right.
You see, and if we can get the younger generation, and let some of these older people die off, maybe we'll be all right as a human race.
right.
That's right.
Because I love seeing these commercials. There's one that they show up here in Buffalo all the time about these two little girls that they were bosom buddies. They were the best of friends, but because of COVID, they weren't able to get together. And when they start opening up and people start coming out of quarantine, they show these two little girls running to each other. One's black, one's white, jumping.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
They just hug them and shouting and screaming. And the caption underneath is, "It's not learned, it's taught."
Absolutely.
That's right. Amen.
Well, thank you guys. I want to
Yes,
tell
sir.
you that the 2 hours are gone.
Wow.
And I know how it seems like it goes just like that. So I'm gonna have you back. So be prepared, because we want to continue this conversation. I really do want to do that. And I'm gonna bring you back with some others that'll be on, and we'll have to have a really extensive conversation and just continue this. And in fact, I'm gonna ask you maybe to reach out to some of your other brothers that might be a part of this, and let's have a roundtable discussion about this. It's going to be important that we do that and continue this conversation. I'll write the article, we'll get it out there, and people can read it, and then we can do that. By the way, folks, please go to www.thebronxchronicle.com. Read the article. I only read it once because the dialogue was really, really important. But it's available to you. You can get it. Please read it. And I want to thank my guests. But let me do this. I contemplated how am I going to close out, and I wrote some things I want to share with you. Okay, so I'm gonna look over here, because if I put it over here, you'll see it. I don't want you to see it. I want you to hear it. So listen up, right? Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King once said, "We are in a network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny." He was so right. Everything we do directly or indirectly affects others, whether we like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to George Floyd didn't directly impact any of us, but it affected all of us. COVID-19 has not taken any of our lives, but it has taken, but the lives that it has taken affected all of us. We live in a network of mutuality. Two young males I talked about before were shot over the weekend in my community. The 17-year-old was pronounced dead, and the 20-year-old is fighting for his life with a bullet in his head. Two separate incidents that has sent shockwaves through the community. Both of those young men were friends of my niece. This network of mutuality has even impacted you because it has impacted me. We live in an inescapable network of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny. What affects one directly affects all indirectly. So, what do we do? If you listen to my guests tonight, you heard them say that we must work together harmoniously and stop thinking like those who dismiss these types of incidents because they didn't happen in their community or to anyone they know. We are better than that.
Amen.
If the coronavirus can teach us anything, you've heard one. It has to be that no one is exempt from its death causing effect. If systemic racism can teach us progress and actualization for those in the privileged class as well, you can't keep a man down without being down yourself. Enemies. And sometimes the enemy is us.
Mm.
Mhm.
The road will be rough and the going will get tough, but we can't quit. Failure is not an option. It is up to us. You, Brian, everyone listening tonight, everyone watching, to you and to me, to make our network of mutuality become the catalyst to build and truly unite this nation and, dare I say, our world for the good of everyone. We must make our network of mutuality a blessing to everyone. Okay, don't forget to purchase your copy of Matters of Faith, the book. Let me show it to you one more time so that you know. Matters of Faith, the book can be purchased on my Cash app, which is $ Matters of Faith, or it can be purchased at Smashwords. I gave it to you before. It was on the screen. I hope you saw it. But that's www.smashwords.com/books/view/993-177. Remember, the 50% discount ends tomorrow. So you want to get it tonight. It's $10. Straight up, you'll get it immediately. It'll be on your phone or on your iPad or on your computer. You can get it. Use the coupon, as I said, and you'll get that 50% discount through June 30th, which is tomorrow. Don't forget the Shepherd Cafe. If you're in the Yonkers area of New York, go and stop by the H Mart in Yonkers and have a dining delight. Tell them that you heard about it on Matters of Faith. The Neighbors Home Care of the Bronx will take your call and your name and put you on their waiting list because they'll be ready to hire you when this pandemic is done. 718-515-2200. And please read the Bronx Chronicle on a regular basis. Not only is my column there, but they have a lot of other articles of interest that will absolutely bless you, certainly inform you. Now, the Lord bless you, the Lord keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Until next week, stay safe, stay healthy, build your immune system, maintain your sanity, stay encouraged, love one another, breathe deeply, handle your earthly obligations, take it to another level, have faith that takes you above and beyond, exercise self control, act justly, love mercy, walk humbly before your God. Remember that we are all in this together, and by all means, let's make this a glorious new beginning and build a network of mutuality. Now, in case you haven't figured it out, those are all the last shows that I've done. I'm just going to keep compiling them and adding another one to it. Those are all the shows from Stay Safe, Stay Healthy, Build Your Immune System. Those are all shows. They're articles that have been written and shows that have been broadcast. Go on my Facebook and you can see them. Go on the Bronx Chronicle and read them. No matter the difficulty you have in life, quote, all things work together for good to those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. Romans 8 and 28. And that, my brothers and sisters, is really a matter of faith. To my guests, both Reverend Pastor Brian Robinson, Reverend Pastor Brian Spearman, I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. I couldn't have done it without you. I really appreciate you and all that you have committed, all that you have shared. And I pray that the Lord will bless you, the Lord will keep you. In fact, I wish you health, I wish you wealth, I wish you gold in store. I wish you heaven after death. What could I possibly wish you more? Thank you, Reverend C.S., for that quote. I appreciate it. I give you credit for it. I love you guys, and there's absolutely nothing that you can do about it. So might as well get used to it. Good night. God bless. I'll see y'all later. Have a
God
good
bless.
evening.
Thank you so much.
You're
God
welcome, and
bless.
thank you guys.
Yes, sir.
All right.